The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon or good morning if you happen to be on the West Coast, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Affordable ERP for Mining. My name is Rihanna Thompson, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Today, we will be exploring how your organization can implement our SAP Business ByDesign mining solution for a low affordable price. Today, we are joined by three representatives of Illumity: Pat Sandel, Mining Account Executive; Andrew Howe, Director of SAP Business ByDesign; and Lorraine Howe, VP of Innovation and Continuous Improvement. Before handing it over to Pat to kick off today's presentation, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters. So if you have any questions throughout the broadcast, feel free to type them out into the chat. However, in the interest of time, we will try to answer the majority of them during the Q&A session. We will hopefully have time to get to everyone. With that being said, I'd like to hand it over to Pat.
Thank you, Rihanna, and thank you everyone for joining. We are here today to showcase our affordable ERP for mining solution. So whether you are in exploration, mine construction, or production, we have a mining solution for you. In terms of our agenda, I'm going to provide you a high-level overview of Illumity. I'll turn it over to Andrew to get into our mining demonstration, and then we'll finish off with Lorraine, who will show some analytics and production statistics. A little bit about who we are. Illumity is a systems integration and management consulting company. We help our customers transform their business through technology. We are headquartered in Toronto and have offices throughout North America. We have over 200 happy clients, over 400 consultants, and finished off last year 99 million in revenue. We go to market across 4 key industries, mining being our largest, with over 30 mining customers, many of whom are global, and over 60 mine sites around the world that we've implemented. If you look at why companies choose SAP, most people think that SAP is only for the largest of companies, but over 75% of SAP's customers worldwide are in companies $1 billion or less in revenue, and more than 67% of SAP customers are mid-sized companies that are growing very quickly. So we have designed a mining solution for the junior mining companies. When you look at SAP's presence in the mining industry, I'm sure most of you know that SAP is a major player in mining. Over 70% of the world's gold is produced by SAP customers. And in North America, we feel 100% of the most successful mining companies run SAP solutions. So let us tell you a little bit about our experience. In terms of Illumity, we have over 30 global mining customers. We meet with our customers and have an annual mining user group where topics are presented by both Illumity and our customers. We have a certified mining template, and this is key. We have pre-built all of the best practices for mining customers and are able to implement our solution in as short as 13 weeks. We've also developed mobile apps and reporting tools specifically for mining, and we have a dedicated mining implementation team, bringing our experts to help you to be able to deploy these solutions quickly. Here are some of the places that we have implemented. Most of our customers are headquartered either in Canada or United States, but many of them have mine sites around the world. In terms of what's included in our affordable mining solution, it includes full financials and management accounting, a full procurement solution, which includes approval for expenditures and integrated request for quotation and vendor contracts, project management. If you're starting construction of a new mine site, you can manage your assets under construction, and project completion, settlement to fixed assets. It's a global solution. Many of our customers have got mine sites around the world, and we provide a full localization support for various countries, multi-company, multi-currency, local expert implementation, and production statistics for our mining operations. In terms of our customers, we are delighted to call these our customers. We would be happy to have you speak to our reference customers at an appropriate time, but we work with customers all throughout North America. At the core of our solution is SAP's fastest growing ERP solution called Business by Design. It's a true software as a service solution, cloud-based solution, and it comes with built-in corporate performance, financials, human resources, project management, and we layer on top of that our mining template, which is pre-built for Virginia mining companies. As well, there's full mobility, analytics, e-learning, and built-in workflow as part of the solution. So I will turn over to Andrew, and we'll get started on the demonstration and showcase our mining solution with you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Give me 1 second here, folks. Just getting the right screen sharing. Pat, can you just confirm that you could see SAP Business by Design? Perfect. All right, everyone. So just to set the stage with our plan for today's demonstration, our intent is to go through basic navigation, ease of use, and analytics. We'll use analytics to actually drill down into some of the core processes that are, fundamental to SAP Business by Design and mining. And we'll take a look at the concept of assets under construction accounting, so to speak, when you're going through mine development and through the key construction phase of your organization. So first and foremost, you'll see that I'm using a Google Chrome browser here to access our demo environment. Our demo environment is representative of a Canadian localization. We of course support many different localizations around the globe to support local operations in mines that might be in a bit of a remote country. With Google Chrome, you are able to use other browsers such as Internet Explorer 8 and above, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, and for those of you using Apple-oriented devices, Safari. You'll notice at the top here that within the URL, there is a specific ID. This ID represents this specific environment, which, as I mentioned, is a demo environment that we use to go through our demonstrations. As a part of your subscription, if you were to move forward with SAP and Illumity, you have access to both a production and test environment at any given point in time. What's important to note is that if you wanted to, once you're live and running the solution, if you would like to refresh the test environment with a fresh copy of production, that is something that you can do at your own fingertips with a area within SAP Business by Design, and you do not need to come to Illumity for such a request. That said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in with a financial-oriented user today. This would represent, for example, your CFO, VP of Finance, maybe controller. The reason why the role is somewhat vague is because we provided this user with liberal access to the environment so that we don't have to log in and out to show, the different areas and modules of the system. So with that said, when you log into Business by Design, you land on what's called My Launchpad. My Launchpad is an area in the system that is customizable for every single user that has access to SAP Business by Design. And I just wanted to cover the key components of this Launchpad, and we'll use it for the course of today's demonstration to access, underlining reports and dashboards as well as transactions. You'll notice at the top that we have these tiles. I mean, across the board we have these tiles, but at the top we have tiles that suggest that there's an internal communication mechanism within SAP Business by Design. So if you have some form of notification or an open task like an approval that you have to address, these items are accessible directly through Business by Design. Now, in the event, if you had, for example, a PO approval or a payment approval that you had to address and approve and review, and you're not logged into SAP Business by Design, once you've set up your company's email domain as a part of configuration, these tasks can be routed to your inbox through your regular email provider. That is extremely useful when you're not in the system. Maybe you're on the road, you'll get a notification that you have something to address and that you represent a step in the process that is required before your counterparts can continue with the work they need to conduct. So with that said, all of these tiles are based on the access you're provided in the system, and you have the ability to slice and dice this Launchpad to your desire. So I'm not going to cover that in today's demonstration, but I wanted to speak to what you can do. So all the different groupings here, you can see we just have something called custom. It's a custom grouping of transactions for us to be able to access by a simple click of the tile. You see we have financial accounting. We also have management and project management, purchasing, organizational management, you name it. But you'll also notice that there are KPIs that are embedded into this launch pad. Now, this is just an example of a few KPIs that come out of the box. We'll actually dive into supplier payables aging as our key analytics dashboard when we get into the underlying transactions. But the point is that these KPIs come pre-delivered, and you can expose them to your launch pad so that you see them, at the beginning of each day when you log into the system. Further to that, we also have the ability to create links, external links to other cloud products that you might use. A lot of our clients use a combination of SAP Analytics Cloud, as well as SuccessFactors for a best-of-breed HR solution. And if you were to click this tile with single sign-on, you can quite easily log into those solutions and automatically be logged in by clicking the tile that you see here. So with that said, a couple other things to orientate the audience on. On the left-hand side here, we have what is known as work centers. All of these work centers have a grouping of transactions. So you can see here under supplier invoicing, we have a variety of transactions. For example, creating an invoice without reference to a purchase order. This would represent your period costs related to electricity and things of that nature. If you had an invoice that was with reference to a purchase order, you go to invoice entry and the purchase orders that are yet to be fulfilled in lie in this area. And if you've received the goods or services, you can then, of course, process an invoice as a three-way match to those upstream transactions. Now, the point is that your access from a security perspective will determine what transactions you have access to in terms of your obligation and integration into an end-to-end process. The logical grouping of the transactions within the work center is built on a concept known as best practice, and it keeps in mind as well the concept of segregation of duties. So in the system, if you're a small organization like a lot of our junior minds, where you have, say, a controller wearing multiple hats. For example, they might wear a hat where they run a payment run, but they also need to distribute the funds to the supplier. Well, based on segregation of duties, which is on the governing body known as Sarbanes-Oxley, you would technically be in violation, of those segregation of duty principles. What SAP does with the embedded security is it informs you as to where you are exposed to potential fraudulent activity, but it doesn't limit you from being able to wear multiple hats, right? Which is extremely important to our junior minds in the initial stages as the mine ramps up into construction and ultimately operations. So I just wanted to mention that. And the security that you have been assigned within SAP also limits, of course, the transactions that you can add to this launch pad. So with that said, what I will do here is just jump into one other piece. There's a built-in help center where you can use this for a variety of different reasons. In this example, I want to learn a little bit more about assets under construction. And when I click in the search criteria here, you'll see that the solution searches all the help resources that we have embedded with SAP. You might have company-specific help, which is specific to your organization, where you embed a document related to this topic. It also searches for community resources, which represents a variety of different wikis, if you will, where partners and customers are blogging about various topics with respect to SAP Business ByDesign, and it's searching that external community for certain blogs and topics that have been published. And then last but not least, SAP does have this knowledge base concept where every single message in the system, whether it's a successful message, a warning, or a error message, you are able to search that knowledge base to determine where the string you've input at the bottom here, which knowledge base document that string lies in. But what I wanted to show you is if I go to this posting under assets under construction link with respect to the help resources, you can actually see here that SAP has a library, so to speak, of all the different topics of features and functions that come out of the box with Business by Design. And you'll see here that this document goes through an overview of what assets under construction represents, what are the prerequisites, right, from a configuration perspective that you need to activate in order to leverage the assets under construction functionality. But more importantly, it goes through a process flow of what assets under construction represents. I'm not going to go through the detail here, but you can see very clearly that the system actually summarizes all the debits and credits as it relates to assets under construction. Okay, so this is great from an informative perspective, where if you are looking to learn about capability, maybe you want to activate, for example, RFQs within your purchasing process, you have the ability to search within the environment directly and ultimately investigate at your own desire as to the topic at hand and use the help center to gain that knowledge. Okay, so that's again a unique feature to SAP Business by Design. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going into a reporting dashboard related to Business by Design in mining. And you'll notice here that there's a wealth of different metrics that we have that come out of the box. So every single KPI that you see here is out of the box from SAP, but as a part of the implementation project, you actually set up certain information pertaining to each KPI. So you'll notice, for example, that there's different colors with respect to the numbers that are shown in the KPI. Like under supplier payables aging, you can see that it's red. The color code signifies how you are tracking in correlation to the corporate objectives that you've associated with the KPI. And you'll see in a moment as to what I mean by that. But when you go into the KPI definition, you can actually see how you're tracking in detail with respect to those objectives. The arrows ultimately signify that the trend of where the KPI is going. So in this circumstance, our supplier payables aging are on the rise, and we're already delinquent, so to speak, with meeting our objective. And again, I can hover my mouse on any part of the pie chart, and you can see, in the 120-day plus bucket, we have around $1 million of outstanding receivables. Again, I'll drill down into this KPI in a moment to showcase the ins and outs of analytics. Before I do that, though, there are two reports that I just wanted to show that we find are extremely pertinent and useful within mining, especially when you're working with an extensive supply chain and in a remote location. So one thing I just wanted to point out here is we have, firstly, vendor price reliability. And if I scroll over here, you'll see that there's a deviation with one of the line items with respect to this report. Vendor price reliability is looking at the prices that you negotiate on your purchase orders with respect to the price that is actually processed on your invoice. So you can see here that your procurement department, your procurement manager or site manager has negotiated certain terms with your suppliers, and you've received obviously those goods or services, and your accounting department has actually processed an invoice where the unit price is different to what was negotiated within purchasing. And so the system in this circumstance flags it as a deviation, right? This is the three-way match process in action, showing you where you have a variant or a variance to what was initially negotiated. Now, what's unique about Business by Design is that we work on what's called an exception basis. So what you can do is when your accounting department is processing a variance of this nature, before you post that invoice to permanent record and then disperse funds to your supplier, you can actually route this variance for approval with your site manager or procurement manager. And what that allows the procurement manager or site manager to do is reach out to the supplier and inquire as to the difference in that price. Now, whether it was maybe processed in error, maybe it's a fluctuation in commodity, or maybe it is just negligence on behalf of that supplier. The point is that the system puts you in a position to manage these variances and deviations from what was negotiated with your supply chain. Second to that, a very important report is vendor delivery reliability. This report basically looks at, and I'll just find an example of where we have, we have a delinquent line here. So what this report represents is the reliability of your vendors to provide you with goods and services based on their commitment in their contract. So what you do on your purchase order is you actually signify an expected delivery date, which is usually, the latest possible date you expect to receive the goods or services. And when you actually receive the goods and services in the system records the receipt date. So you can actually see here that the last actual date was in April 2020 or April 22nd of 2021. We were actually expecting to receive these goods back in 2019. So I know this is an extreme example, but the concept here is that if you have suppliers, especially when you're in a remote location, that provide you with multiple suppliers providing you with the same product, you can use this reliability report to determine who you would prefer to engage with, because they seem to provide you with what you need on site, with expectations that are negotiated at the contract level. Okay, so that's just two examples of reports that we find a lot of our minds benefiting from. And then last but not least, we do have this Maverick Spend KPI. And this ultimately represents where your accounting department is processing invoices without reference to a purchase order. And you can see here that this particular report is showcasing the data visually grouped by individual supplier. Okay, but with no further ado, I want to get into the ins and outs of analytics and then drill down into the core, some core processes to mining with respect to procure to pay. And we'll see some assets under construction and core accounting topics that I'm sure all of you are ready to dive into. So you see here, I drilled down into the KPI. I spoke about those thresholds that are established as a part of your implementation. You can see here that this organization has set a target of never exceeding 35,000 with respect to their payables. The warning level as to where we are, getting further away from that objective is at the $100,000 mark. And the KPI goes red, meaning we are exceeding our standards. We need to improve. That has been set at 200,000. And that's what drives the logic in terms of the color coding you see here. You'll also notice that from a payables perspective, an individual who is looking to pay their obligations within your accounting department, they can visualize where those different payables lie within certain buckets of overdue. So you can see that most of our payables are at the 120-day bucket overdue, and I just want to see who we are owing money in that bucket. So the way I could do that is by changing my contextual report. I'm going to go to my 120-day bucket view, and I can actually see the suppliers that make up that balance. Okay, and I can run that for any one of these individual contextual reports. And just for the record, as a part of the project, if you wanted a different report format to be included in the KPI, we have the ability to associate a custom report to this view, and then you have the ability to access it from here directly. Now, when I go to the AP aging report, I want to show you how you can slice and dice this data to your desire. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking on this Analyze Data button, which takes me into the underlying report definition. From here, I can change my visual display to a variety of different pre-delivered visual display graphs, bar charts, scatter diagrams, you name it, line charts. But what I want to do is show you how you can slice and dice the data to bring in additional information. So before I add data to this report, you'll see I changed it to our table view. You do have the ability to change your filter criteria. You can see the bucket sizes and of course the cutoff date. So if you wanted to look at your payables situation as of say 2 weeks ago, you could change this date and it will give you a view of what payables look like 2 weeks prior. Now, if I want to add additional information to the report, like let's say, for example, I need to see my business partner, which is the supplier. I want to see the supplier invoice. And you know what? I also want to see the due date, right? I want to bring these elements of data, into my report. Well, SAP Business ByDesign sits on an in-memory computing database, which ultimately means that we have a pivot table on steroids. You're able to basically slice and dice this data. You'll see that it's still a bit messy because I have my key figures at the row level. I can simply drag the key figures to the column level. So I can now see by supplier, the due date of each of these invoices, and then the bucket within where that invoice falls. So with that said, I can do a couple things here. I can drag and drop my supplier invoice to be ahead of my due date. And I can, of course, add a result row to the report as well. So I can see here, by supplier, these are the totals now per bucket that we've included in the report. From here, there's a variety of things you can do. You can, of course, save this format so you don't have to recreate it in the future. But you can, of course, share the content via email to a receiving user. If you provide them with access to a link to the web browser, what this will give them is a link where they would, when they click the link, it would take them to their ByDesign login. But security has a role to play here. If the receiving user doesn't have the appropriate access to access this report, they will still be able to log in, but they'll get an error message saying they don't have the appropriate authority. You can download the report into a variety of formats. You could see an interesting one here, the data source, but still connected via data source, but in CSV. But what you can also do is use our integrated Microsoft Excel add-in. This comes pre-delivered from SAP. All of our clients use it. You have the ability to slice and dice the data as you've seen here in the system directly. You're able to do that in Excel with a live connection as well. And what that means is if you have an invoice processed as you're in Excel running that report, it'll refresh in real time. So what I want to do from here is I'm just scrolling down. I want to actually go into what we call the 360 view of one of our suppliers. So what I'm going to do here is drill down into the business partner of Omigo. Any one of these objects, by the way, in the report, for example, the invoice, I have the ability to drill down into the invoice directly from the report. But with Omigo, I'm going to go into the business partner overview. And from here, you'll see that the business partner represents a single object that represents this organization as a whole. It represents a supplier, a bidder, and a freight forwarder. So this particular supplier has multiple different roles with respect to how they conduct their business with our company. So what I'm going to do is go into their supplier record, and what will land in here is what we call the 360 view of the supplier. So first and foremost, you'll notice that we've landed on what's called the General tab here. I just have the data refreshing here because there's some embedded reports. But you can see some general information with respect to their location, contact information, some default purchasing terms here. You can see the default payment terms that would populate in the purchase order. When you create a new purchase order, the encode terms, so on and so forth. And there are reports down here as well that are embedded. If I click on any one of these reports, like price reliability that you saw in the first part of the demo, it will take the code of the supplier and pass it to that report, so you're only looking at data with respect to that one supplier. So from here, a couple things. If I go to financials, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. Firstly, you will note that there are multiple account balances for this supplier at the company level. So we're a multi-company, multi-currency solution. And so company code 1000 has a balance of, roughly 12,000 with Omigo, and company code 2000 has around, 2,500. The point is that we have one supplier record that serves all the different entities that we set up within the system. And this helps, from a master data maintenance and governance perspective, it's all centralized. So as I move on here, I want to go into purchasing. Here you will see a variety of different things. If you had a pre-negotiated price list with the supplier, it would populate here. In this circumstance, we don't have that. We have all of our purchase orders, any contracts that you may have where you draw a purchase order from that contract. The contract may encompass, for example, pricing terms. In this case, it looks like for geology consulting services. And of course, we have embedded RFQs, right? So we do have the ability to facilitate an RFQ process when you go out to source certain work from the supply chain. What I want to do here is just find a specific purchase order. When I go into the purchase order 506, you'll notice anything that's a blue hyperlink, I have the ability to drill down into that underlining object. So I've drilled down into my purchase order. And what I want to do here is just highlight what we call the document flow, which I like to describe as the breadcrumb trail of all the embedded best practices that we have within SAP. So you can see that this purchase order, we've actually received the assay charges associated with this purchase order, and it subsequently has been invoiced. The invoice has been processed from the supplier, and you can see the status is shown as paid. If I change the anchor to the view of the supplier invoice, you could see that we've paid the supplier with a bank transfer, and it has subsequently been reconciled with our bank statement, okay? So this is the breadcrumb trail or document flow that resides throughout our system, regardless of the best practice that you're leveraging. You'll notice there's another icon here though. It looks like a folder where some file is being placed within that folder. This represents your corresponding journal entry. So when I go into what's called the goods and service confirmation, it's basically a step in the process where you receive the goods. In this case, it's assay charges. You'll actually see our embedded project systems and assets under construction logic at play here. So you'll see that it's a two-step entry. There's multiple journal entries here. There's a two-step entry that clears the assay charges from the P&L into assets under construction so that you can later capitalize these costs into your balance sheet under the appropriate fixed asset class. But before I actually show the corresponding entry here, I just want to explain a few things. You'll notice that we have a set of books, and we're looking at the Canadian GAAP set of books in this example. And we have related journal entries down here for IFRS. So we have the concept of multiple ledgers, which allows us to adhere to rules that are governed under the respective accounting bodies here. In addition to this, you can see at the row level, we have company currency as well as transaction currency. This happens to be a Canadian purchase, so we don't have a transaction currency and a different currency to that of our company. But in the event you had a foreign currency transaction, the exchange rate that are maintained in the system will determine the conversion between transaction and company currency. That exchange rate can be managed via the UI directly. It could be uploaded through Excel, or it could also be integrated with websites like Oanda where those rates are maintained. Now, what I want to do here is just go into the second journal here, which represents the original journal for when we receive these charges. So you can see that we have a credit to unbilled payables, which is the GL account that gets cleared with accounts payable when you receive the invoice. It debits the P&L for assay charges, and as I mentioned in that first entry, it credits the P&L and moves it to assets under construction, and that is an automated journal entry. What I want to do here is just click on the assay charges row, and you'll see that it's associated to what we call a project. This project, I'll drill down into it, represents the project systems capability of our solution. So what I'll do here is just go into the view all area. I'm just going to show some rudimentary capabilities. I have to jump to org structure and then pass it off to Lorraine. It looks like we are a few minutes behind, but I'll make it up as quick as I can. So you'll see here that within project systems, we have, if anyone's familiar with products like Primavera or Microsoft projects, we have the ability to obviously integrate, but we also have some basic capabilities that overlaps with those best of breed project management solutions. And here you will see that this particular example, we wanted to break out our fixed assets by these, what we call work breakdown structure elements. And they're tied to separate assets under construction GL accounts and asset classes. Some are buildings, well, most of this would be buildings, but they would be created as separate assets when you do decide to capitalize once you complete the construction side of the life cycle. So with that said, we could spend a lot of time on how you can use projects to actually manage your capital projects. But what I wanted to do is actually go into some embedded reporting here. which gives us visibility into the nature of the costs that we've incurred, on this particular project. So let me just refresh this here. Okay, I do apologize for the delay here. Yeah. So yeah, just while this is refreshing, what I'll do is just recap how I got here. I'll jump into organizational management and then pass it over to Lorraine. But it does look like we have a slight delay in the system. I do have others that are working in here, and they may have this project locked. In any case, let me just recap how we got here. You can see we have planned work, actual work remaining. The data is refreshing, as I mentioned, but I just wanted to elaborate as to how we got here. So we have the exploration of this new property. We got into the project, if you recall. We got to the project from by drilling down into the project from this receipt of assay charges journal. We got to this journal entry from the journal entry that's automated by the system that capitalizes the cost into assets under construction by crediting the P&L and debiting your balance sheet. We got to that journal by clicking on this icon here in the goods and service confirmation, right? Which was embedded in this document flow of this purchase order. We got to the purchase order by drilling down into it from the 360 view of the supplier. And we got into the 360 view of the supplier by drilling down into their record from a report that we customized to our desire. And we got to this report from a KPI that brought certain information to our attention. And we got to this KPI from an underlining dashboard of various different KPIs by drilling down into its definition and then going from there. So you can see the power of analytics at play here and how you can dive from analytics into literal debits and credits at the grassroots level. So I just wanted to kind of recap how we got down into that area of the system. What I'll do here is just close these two tabs and just go into organizational management. This is where you ultimately set up your profit center and cost center hierarchies. You'll notice that there's an effective from date. You have the ability to model your company based on a certain time frame. So if you decentralize the structure of your organization, you have the ability to accommodate that type of evolution within SAP. So you'll see here when I click on Almeca, I just go to Definitions tab. Almeca and Innovate are independent legal entities in the system. And you'll see here that in this circumstance, they're registered in Canada, and there's an associated business partner that's automatically created by the system to facilitate automatic intercompany transactions. And that's, again, a whole nother topic, but we have automated intercompany when you have multiple legal entities in play. Now, what I want to do is just expand Almeca. I'm not going to go into the settings of all of this, but you'll see here that we have what's called our mining best practice structure. So what I want to do is actually just change the table view. It'll be a little bit easier to see because we have quite an in-depth hierarchy here. So this mining best practice cost center hierarchy is what a lot of our mines use. The level of detail as to how low they go is mine dependent based on the output of reporting they want, but this will tie into production statistics that Lorraine will get into in about 30 seconds. So what I wanted to do here is just expand the hierarchy. You'll see I'm going down into operations. I'll go into mining. We'll look at our mine operations. I want to look at the stope, and you'll see here, for example, that I have a cost center at the row here. See the cost center for our drilling costs related to the mine stope. And as you process transactions in SAP that are related to operations and you record those expenses against this cost center, you can then pair them up with our production statistics solution, which I'll hand off for Lorraine to walk the audience through for today. Just to recap, if anyone has any questions, please pose them in the webinar. And at the end of Lorraine's session, we'll do our best to address as many as possible.
Thank you, Andrew. That was excellent and a good introduction into the the mining and the production stats part of the mining implementations. So can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
We are good.
Okay, fantastic. Just wanted to confirm that. All right, I'm probably going to close my webcam, but just quickly to introduce myself, I have been with Illumity for 13 years now. When I started, I was very much involved in mining as one of our main verticals within our organization, and worked within finance and then into business intelligence for a while, and then just recently have been involved in innovation, which is really looking at what SAP is doing and helping customers move forward digitally in terms of improving the usage of SAP as well as becoming mobile. And that's the aspect of it that I want to discuss with you today. So Andrew showed you a little bit of the mining hierarchy or the cost center hierarchy that we recommend to our customers. These are really highlighting the areas of your mine where you would be collecting statistics around the activities of the mine. And I'm focusing particularly on production statistics today. So let me get into that. Let me just turn my camera off. All right, good. All right, so the production stats, of course, becomes really relevant when your mine moves from exploration and development into actually producing. And at that point in time, you are going to want to be able to track the progress of your mine. And in order to be able to do that, there are various ways, of course. You could have clipboards with Excel spreadsheets where you track the information. You could have a system that actually tracks the information for you, specifically in the operational areas of your mine where you can link to machines. Or you might have your supervisors collecting information on mobile applications. And that's what I want to talk about today. However, I will also add to that the other sources of production stats can also be interfaced into this application and used for the reporting that I'll show you in a minute. But let's look quickly at what it would look like for a supervisor who's collecting the production stats for the day within the mine. So I've got a bunch of applications. This looks very similar to the applications you saw that Andrew showed you. But I'm going to focus on the Statistics Manager, which is really a mobile-oriented app that enables a supervisor to collect those stats that I spoke about. And you can see it defaults to today's date, but you can also go back if you forgot or couldn't collect the stats from previous days. You can go back and enter those stats there, or you could make adjustments for statistics that have been collected on other days. In our solution, we also have the ability to track these statistics by shift. So if you have a supervisor that has multiple shifts during the day and wants to compare his shifts in reporting, for example, he can choose different shifts. And he sets this up himself through a console, which I won't get into today, but a place where he can actually define what shifts he is managing. So I just have a couple here, so I'll just choose the regular day shift as an example. Also, if you have multiple mine sites and you want to indicate on your production stats which mine site you're looking at, you also have the ability to choose the mine site from a list of mine sites that you might have. The section, it really represents the area within the mine where you're collecting those stats. And this typically would be a stope, like Andrew was showing you earlier. It could also be other, very high level, like the entire mine. You could say, I want to collect, if I'm a gold mine and I'm mining ounces of gold, I would like to see the stats around those ounces of gold at the highest level and use that in calculations against my costs and revenues for the company. But for now, I'm just going to look at the locations within the mine, and I have all these stopes and walls set up as examples. So I'm just going to choose one of those and say, I'm going to collect today. This shift is working on the long wall, and I want to see what stats I'm recording. Now, typically, as a supervisor, this would just default to my user ID, but this could also be used by a clerk within the office. This is a desktop application as well as a mobile application. So you could get someone else to enter. If you are sticking to spreadsheets on a clipboard, you could get someone else to enter this data in the office. So I just chose myself there, or my representation in the system, and I'm going to start entering data. You would also notice that we can collect actuals or budget or plan data through this application. I'm going to focus on actuals today, but it's important for you to notice that you can also put plans in, so you can see how you're trending against your plan. And I'll show you the reporting that comes with that. And of course, budgets come in various versions, so you can have different types of forecasts as a result of that. But once you know this level, we can then go in and create the entries, the statistical entries in the system. I have some defaults set up for the long haul, just as an example here. I'm collecting tons produced, I'm collecting meters advanced, and I'm also collecting liters of fuel, just as examples of things that have happened. And you can see here that I've collected nothing today. This will get updated every time I make an entry against this shift and this particular location in the mine. But I could just go in and say, okay, we produced 10 tons, we advanced 5 meters, and we used up 50 liters or 30 liters of fuel. So that's all you have to do. You just save that, and these statistics are then collected in the system. As mentioned, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, it's kind of recording that it has saved the data, and it keeps an audit trail because it's documented with my name and the date and time of collection. So that's the collection side of it, and this can be done through spreadsheets and through interfaces to systems. The next thing we'd like to look at is, well, what kind of reporting can we do with this? So for that, I'm actually going to go into a reporting solution that sits alongside the reporting that Andrew showed you earlier today, which is embedded in the actual solution. And the reason why I'm going here is not because the embedded solution can't handle this. It's really just to show you some of the additional capabilities around prediction and insights that this tool outside of or alongside the system allows you to accumulate. So just clicking on that, the single sign-on, so it will log me in directly. I now have access to this data that I've just entered, and I can start looking at that data in a more holistic format. So here you see a dashboard I created. This is my homepage. So any supervisor or anybody looking at this data could actually build their own incoming dashboard just to show them the highlights that they need to see for that day. So I'm looking at, on the left-hand side here, at costs by cost center. This is purely cost data that Andrew just showed you being collected in the system. I have cost distributions here, but then I also have statistics, different statistics that I've been collecting, shown in this middle graph of this particular page. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, I have a trend looking at different costs over time. And you can see that embedded at the end of this is some forecasting capability, which I will show you in a minute as well. So if we're looking at any of this in detail, you can see this is just a graphical view that gives me some information to show me where most of my costs are. If I wanted to get into more detail, I can actually go to the detailed dashboard from where this particular piece comes from. So I click on that. It gives me a more comprehensive dashboard with other elements in it that gives me an overview feel of where we are today. So our costs to date are $18 million, pretty expensive, and how these costs are split up are seen below in that dashboard that we're just looking at. So now here I can see more detail. Most of the costs were in the heap leach, where we're actually are cleaning the ore. But we can see that the next level of cost goes to mining operations and so on. Now from here, I can drill down to details because on the heap leach, for example, I want to see what are the details around that. By clicking on that, I can see that most of this, the costs are coming from these different areas of the mine. So this is very helpful for me when I want to get into details, and you can drill down to the actual transactions from here if need be. What I wanted to show you too in this particular graph is the insights that you see at the bottom. these insights are not insights that I've programmed into this dashboard. It's insights provided by the tool when it sees the information and knows the data set or the data source that I'm looking at. So it's telling me, okay, heap leach is your highest dollar amount, which is obvious from this graph, but it's also telling me that there's a 93% deviation from average, which I couldn't just tell from the graph itself, but it has calculated that for me. And then also given me the trend over the last 3 months in the year that I was looking at. So I could see in December it was, $329,000. November it was actually more, and there was a decrease compared to October, from November to October. So October was my most expensive month. So this is all kind of interesting, and I would like this depicted in my dashboard and not just an insight with words here. So from here I could actually go into edit mode of this particular graph and say, show me more about these insights. So when I click on view more here, it opens up a tab on the right-hand side and gives me some graphical representation of what we just saw. So here's the trend over the different months that we saw for the heap leach. So I could either say, this is a great graph and I want to add this to my dashboard, but let me see what other insights you have. So it's also saying that the top contributors in terms of the spend on this particular area of my mine is cyanide. So that sounds obvious because we're using cyanide to do the cleaning of the ore. If I open that up, it actually gives me a breakdown of all the different costs. So all the different components and chemicals that I'm using within the heap leach are recorded here. So this is great. This is actually information I was looking for, not so much the trending over the months. So I can go in and add this to my dashboard. So I can just click on this. I can put it on a new Canvas page, or I can just add it to this dashboard over here. So automatically now I have something generated. I didn't build it because I didn't need to. The system actually advised it, and I can play around with this. I can move it around. I can expand it and make it bigger and so on. So if I want to see more, I can continue with the insights and build my dashboard that way. On the top right-hand corner, this is that trend graph that I showed you earlier. That's just showing my costs trending over time and with the forecasting at the end. So this forecasting is embedded into the solution, and there are different methods of forecasting that we could apply here that the system then will adjust to depending on what we need. Included as well, from a statistics perspective, I'm just going to click to a different tab in this report, is all the costs per statistics. So no matter what stat I'm tracking, if it could be tons produced, it could be tons mined, it could be ounces produced, and so on. The system will calculate under my instructions, of course, because I built the report, to divide that statistics into the costs that are produced. And so this is embedded into my dashboard, and I can drill down from here into the details behind this. So now for exploration, for example, if I look at the employee details, I can actually open this up and see the detailed expenses or around employees and get the cost for each of those expenses. It doesn't make a lot of sense on the employee benefit side, but I can also look at the mining operating supplies and see the costs for each of those supplies. So how much is timber costing me per ton produced? So really, it's a very comprehensive way of looking at my results. And then last but not least, the trending of all these production stats. I can look at the actual versus plan if I'm collecting the actuals of all the different types of statistics that I'm collecting in the system. On any one of these reports, I can also create comments. So there's a lot more that you can do within this environment other than seeing smart insights. I can also go in and add, for example, different thresholds and so on, but I can also add comments. And these comments are stored. So if I say, these trends look interesting or whatever, that comment will be restored against myself and with a date and time alongside of it. So that's all information that I could get just out of this solution on its own. So I know we're running out of time. We've got 5 minutes left for our webinar. But this was just to give you a feel of what could be done with your production stats once you get into that phase of your mine. So I'll hand over back to Rihanna. So just in case there are any questions that we can address before we leave the webinar.
Thank you, Lorraine. I sent out a quick note to everyone that if you do have any questions for our presenters, feel free to type them in now. In the meantime, I'd like to give a big thanks to our presenters for today. I found today's presentation very insightful, and I hope all of our attendees enjoyed it as well. So while we wait and see if there's any other questions coming through from the chat, in the meantime, Andrew, why don't I pose a question that we receive very frequently from sessions like these? How does the upgrade process work with SAP Business ByDesign? That's something we've gotten in the past that you might want to cover.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, Rihanna. So in the cloud world, where you're dealing with a multi-tenant scenario, meaning that many different clients are sharing the same infrastructure, we are upgraded on a quarterly basis, but SAP has to make sure that our upgrades go uneventful. And the reason for that is you have many different clients leveraging the same suite in the box best practice. And so the approach that SAP has employed is that any improvement in functionality or enhancement where, for example, we had assets under construction added as capability a few years ago, you have to go into configuration and activate that functionality for you to reap the benefits of it. And the importance of this approach is that they limit disruption to what is working already in place for organizations that are already live on the solution. So that's an important thing to mention. Illumity still recommends that you identify what we call golden scripts, and you use them every quarter before an upgrade just to make sure that you go through at least a basic element of regression testing before the environment is upgraded. It's always good to be safe, but a lot of our clients that are longer standing on ByDesign have come to the realization that they don't really have to do too much regression testing because SAP does have a good approach to limiting the impact of an upgrade.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew. Right now, we don't have any additional questions coming from the audience, but I will let everyone who's in attendance now know that if you do have any questions from today's presentation, feel free to reach out to our team. And as I say this, one comes through. Quick question. How do we manage new functionality?
So, okay, yeah, I think I know where this is coming from. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you have like a phased approach to your implementation. You want to activate a module that you haven't necessarily, started leveraging. And I don't know if this is addressing the question at hand because it is very basic, but the point is that ByDesign can be rolled out in a modular fashion. Now, the key here is, and this is where Illumity plays an instrumental role, is that we do have to advise and recommend as to, what modules can lead others because there are dependencies, right? A good example of that, for example, is finance. Most upstream or downstream modules, if you will, have an impact on finance. So the debits and credits have to be accounted for in advance before activating, for example, supply chain. If you wanted to have procure to pay and receive materials and whatnot, there are debits and credits that have to be considered. So there's a dependency between activating finance and procurement. But I think to address the question, how do you handle new functionality? It comes down to putting together a proper roadmap of what your organization needs to start with versus where they will go over time, and making sure that there's no conflicts, if you will, with that strategy. But it is modular, and you could start with finance and procurement, and then activate warehousing, supply chain at a later time.
We have one more question, Andrew, before I think we'll call it a day. Is there any inbuilt ESG recording/reporting functionality?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily embedded like I know some of our counterparts in this industry have with the product itself, but we use a product known as Enable Now that allows you to achieve that objective. And Enable Now is a general recording tool, so you can use it not just for creating material related to the ERP, But if there are steps outside of the ERP, you could use that recording tool for documenting, things that you might be doing in Excel or any other system. For example, if you're using SuccessFactors as a best of breed solution, you can use Enable Now for both to generate that content. So instead of it being embedded, it is another SAP tool, but it's still, we have a best of breed that will meet that requirement.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. I do know that we have 2 more questions in the chat right now, but we are at the top of the hour and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to have Andrew reach out to each of these individuals privately after the broadcast. Same thing goes for any of our other attendees who'd like to send in a few more questions. We'll happily reach out to you after today's broadcast. And everyone will receive a copy of the recording of today's broadcast tomorrow afternoon. With that being said, I'd like to thank everyone who was here to attend live with us. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful remainder of your day.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.